At 5:41 on a Tuesday morning, my son called me from the parking lot of an old gas station off Route 29. He did not say hello. He did not ask if I was awake. He just said, "Dad, she changed the codes." By the time I pulled in 12 minutes later, the sky was still the color of dishwater and the pumps had not even been turned on yet. My son, Owen, was sitting on the curb beside the ice machine with his little girl asleep against his chest, her cheek pressed to his flannel shirt, one pink sneaker missing. There were 3 trash bags at his feet, a diaper backpack, and a cardboard box with "kitchen" written on it in someone else's handwriting. That was all they let him take from a home he had repaired with his own 2 hands. He did not look angry. That was what scared me. Angry men move. Angry men pace. Angry men cuss and hit steering wheels and make promises they cannot keep. Owen just sat there like someone had reached inside him and unplugged the part that knew how to stand. His daughter, Lily, stirred in his arms and made a little sound in her sleep. I parked my truck, walked over, and set one hand on my boy's shoulder. "She said I'm not family," he whispered. I looked at the child in his arms. Then I looked down at the bags. Then I looked toward the highway, where the morning traffic was just beginning to wake up. And I knew something his mother-in-law did not. For 11 months, I had been waiting for that woman to make the one mistake proud people always make. I had watched her build a cage around my son, one polished little bar at a time. I had copied papers, saved messages, sat in courthouse hallways, and paid a lawyer out of the money I had once saved for a fishing boat I never bought. In the glove box of my truck was a blue folder, with certified copies inside. In my desk at home was a flash drive with 73 recordings and photographs, and in the inside pocket of my jacket was a court order that had been signed at 4:18 the previous afternoon. My son did not know any of that yet. He only knew he had been put outside before sunrise with a sleeping child in his arms. I bent down, picked up Lily's missing sneaker from where it had fallen behind the curb, and put it in my coat pocket. Then I said the only thing a father can say when his child is sitting in the cold with nowhere to go. "Get in the truck, son. Both of you are coming home. My name is Russell Kane. I am 66 years old, and for 38 of those years, I worked for the county recorder's office in a town called Hartley, Tennessee. That is not exciting work to most people. Nobody makes movies about men who file deeds, marriage licenses, tax liens, birth certificates, and probate notices. But if you spend enough decades reading what people sign when they think nobody is looking, you learn something about the world. Love has a sound. So does ownership, and there are people who can say, "I'm only trying to help," in a voice that sounds exactly like a padlock clicking shut. My son Owen never had much use for suspicion. He got that from his mother, not from me. My wife, Ruth, believed people were mostly trying their best, until life proved otherwise. She died of a stroke when Owen was 23, and I remember standing next to him at her grave thinking that if grief could make a man harder, it could also make him kinder. Owen chose kinder. He became a paramedic. He worked nights, holidays, storms, wrecks, overdoses, house fires. He was the man who knelt in broken glass to keep strangers breathing. He could carry a 200-pound man down 3 flights of stairs and then come home and spend 20 minutes moving a beetle off the porch because he did not want to step on it. That was my son. He met Grace Whitcomb at a fundraiser for a children's hospice. She was beautiful, yes, but that was never what hooked him. It was the way she listened when old people talked. Owen noticed things like that. Grace came from the kind of family whose name was painted on hospital wings and library plaques. Her mother, Vivian Whitcomb, owned 3 assisted living facilities, 2 outpatient clinics, and half the commercial property around the lake. Vivian had silver hair cut sharp at the jaw, pearls at her throat, and a smile that could pass inspection from a distance. She spoke softly, but everyone around her leaned in as if soft meant important. At the engagement dinner, she held my hand between both of hers and told me she had heard wonderful things about Owen. Then she looked at his work boots under the table. Just one glance. Barely a second. But I had spent my life watching people reveal themselves in the inch between what they say and what they mean. Grace loved my son. I believe that. I need you to know it before I tell the rest. She was not empty. She was not cruel by nature. But she had been raised by a woman who believed affection was something you earned by obedience. Grace could disagree with a stranger. She could stand up to a rude waiter. But when her mother said her name a certain way, she became 12 years old again. Owen did not see it at first. Men in love can mistake a warning sign for a shadow. They married in a chapel by Willow Lake. Vivian paid for everything, which meant Vivian chose almost everything. The flowers, the menu, the photographer, the string quartet, even the shade of Grace's lipstick. Owen laughed it off. "She's just excited, Dad," he said. At the reception, Vivian gave a toast about legacy. Not marriage, not love, legacy. She said families were not built by feelings, but by standards. People clapped because rich people can say cold things under chandeliers and make them sound like wisdom. I watched Owen put his arm around Grace and kiss the side of her head. I watched Vivian watching them, and I felt that old county office instinct wake up in me. Check the paperwork, Russell. A year later, Lily came into their lives. Not by birth, by a phone call at 2:13 inches the morning. Grace's cousin, Melanie, had died in a car accident outside Chattanooga. Melanie was 29, alone in the world except for a little baby girl who had been in the back seat and somehow survived with only a bruise on her forehead. Melanie had left a handwritten letter saying if anything ever happened to her, she wanted Grace to raise the baby. Owen called me from the hospital. His voice sounded broken open. "Dad," he said, "she's so small. I drove all night." When I got there, Owen was sitting in a plastic chair outside pediatrics with that baby asleep against his chest. Her tiny hand had closed around one of his fingers. Grace sat beside him, crying quietly into a tissue. Vivian stood at the nurse's station, already speaking to someone about arrangements. The baby's name was Lily May. Owen became her father before any judge said the word. That is how it happens sometimes. Not in courtrooms, not on certificates, but at 3 in the morning under fluorescent lights when a child cries and one person keeps showing up. He learned how to warm bottles. He learned which lullaby made her stop fussing. He learned to drive with one hand behind the passenger seat so she could hold his finger from the car seat. Later, when she started talking, she called him Daddy, like the word had been waiting for him. I want you to hold on to that, friend. Because the law matters. Blood matters to some folks. Paper matters to men like me. But there are things a child knows before the world teaches her to question them. Lily knew Owen was her daddy. The trouble started with gifts. It usually does. Vivian offered Owen and Grace a house on Laurel Bend, closer to the lake and closer to her. "Just until you get settled with the adoption," she said. It was a white farmhouse with a wraparound porch, better than anything two young people could afford on a paramedic salary and part-time nonprofit work. Owen wanted to say no. Grace wanted to say yes. Vivian said it was for Lily's stability. That phrase became her favorite tool. For Lily's stability, Owen should transfer to day shift. For Lily's stability, Grace should stop working and help at one of Vivian's facilities. For Lily's stability, they should use Vivian's attorney, because adoption law was too delicate to trust to strangers. For Lily's stability, all mail about Melanie's estate should go through Vivian's office so Owen and Grace would not be burdened. Every time Vivian said stability, another decision left my son's hands. I asked Owen once, very gently, whose name was on the house. He shrugged. Vivian's company owns it for now. She says she'll transfer it once the adoption is final. For now is one of the most expensive phrases in the English language. I asked if he had copies of the adoption filings. He said Vivian's lawyer had everything. I asked if he had seen Melanie's estate papers. He said there wasn't much to see. Then he smiled at me like I was worrying over nothing and told me Lily had learned to say moon. That is the loneliness of being a parent to a grown child. You can see a storm forming over their roof, but if you point too hard, they will defend the clouds. So I backed off. Out loud. Privately, I began keeping notes. The first real crack came at Lily's second birthday party. Vivian threw it at the lake house, though Owen had wanted a small backyard party with cupcakes and balloons. There were catered sandwiches, white tents, a woman making balloon animals, and children dressed better than I dressed for church. Lily got overwhelmed by all the noise and hid behind Owen's leg. Vivian bent down and said, "Come here, darling. Don't cling." Owen picked Lily up. "She's tired." Vivian's smile did not move. "You baby her too much." I watched my son hold that little girl tighter. Later, I was standing near the kitchen when I heard Vivian talking to a woman from her board. She did not know I was there. "Owen means well," she said. But men like that confuse affection with parenting. Lily needs structure. She needs our world, not his habits. Our world, not his. I went home that night and wrote those words on a yellow legal pad. 3 months later, Grace came to my house alone. She looked thinner. Not sick exactly, worn down around the edges. I made coffee. She did not drink it. "Russell," she said, "did Owen ever tell you what happened with the adoption hearing?" I sat down across from her. "He told me it was delayed." She looked at the table. "Mother said it was routine. What do you think?" Grace closed her eyes. "I don't know what I think anymore." That was all she gave me. Then her phone rang. She looked at the screen and went pale. "Vivian." She sent it to voicemail, but the damage was done. She stood up, hugged me like a person holding onto a fence in a flood, and left. I did not call Owen, not yet. I called a woman named Marlene Ortiz. Marlene had been a deputy clerk in juvenile court before retiring. She had taught me more about court records than any manual ever did. She did not gossip. She did not bend rules. But she knew where public records lived, and she knew how to read the silence between missing documents. 2 days later, she called me back. "Russell," she said, "there is a guardianship order, but I do not see a finalized adoption." I gripped the phone. "Who has guardianship?" There was a pause. "Grace and Vivian Whitcomb." "Not Owen?" "No." I remember looking out my kitchen window at the bird feeder Ruth had loved. A cardinal landed on it, bright red against the gray morning. Marlene kept talking. There had been a temporary order after Melanie died. Grace and Vivian had been named. Owen had signed something as household caregiver, but there was no petition listing him as adoptive father. No final decree. No corrected birth certificate. Nothing showing the law had caught up to the love that child lived under every day. I asked about Melanie's estate. Marlene said, "You need a lawyer for that." So I got one. Her name was Denise Carver, and she had an office above a bakery in Franklin. She wore plain black suits, kept peppermints in a chipped glass bowl, and had the calmest eyes I had ever seen on a lawyer. I brought her everything I had. Dates, texts Owen had forwarded, photos from birthdays, school forms where Owen was listed as father, pediatric records he had signed, insurance payments from his account. Denise listened without interrupting. Then she said, "Mr. Kane, this is not just a family problem." Over the next 11 months, I learned what Vivian had done. Melanie did not leave nothing. She had a life insurance policy through her employer and a wrongful death settlement from the trucking company responsible for the crash. Not millions like a movie, but enough to matter. Enough to pay for Lily's school, medical care, and future. Enough that the wrong person would want control of it. A trust had been created for Lily. Vivian had positioned herself as trustee. Not Grace, not Owen, Vivian. The house on Laurel Bend had never been intended as a gift. It was owned by a Whitcomb Property LLC, and Owen had spent nearly $18,000 of his own money repairing plumbing, replacing porch boards, fixing the nursery, and installing safety rails because Vivian kept saying, "We all invest in family." The adoption had not been delayed. It had been diverted. Every time Owen asked, Grace told him what Vivian told her to say. "These things take time. The court is backed up. The attorney is handling it. Do not upset the process. I do not excuse Grace. Let me be clear about that. Being afraid of your mother does not give you the right to let your husband live a lie. But fear can make cowards of people who still have goodness in them." I knew Grace was trapped too. I also knew Lily could not afford for me to waste time deciding how much blame belonged to whom. So I built. That is what old men like me do when we cannot sleep. I got copies of every public filing. I found the notary who had stamped a consent form Owen did not remember signing. She worked out of a UPS store then, and when Denise subpoenaed her journal, the date beside Owen's supposed signature showed a day he had been on a 24-hour ambulance shift 2 counties away. We had the dispatch log to prove it. I found canceled checks for the house repairs. I saved voicemails where Vivian called Lily a Whitcomb child and told Owen he should remember he was invited into this family, not born into it. I kept screenshots of texts where Grace wrote, "Mom says we need to wait before adding your name. And please don't ask questions tonight. She's in one of her moods." I drove to Chattanooga and found Melanie's old neighbor, a retired mail carrier named June Pritchard, who still had a copy of the letter Melanie had written. The original had disappeared into Vivian's attorney's office. June's copy said something Vivian had never mentioned. If Grace cannot do this with her whole heart, I want Russell Kane's son Owen considered. He was the only man I ever saw hold a baby like she was already a person. I sat in my truck outside June's house and cried for the first time in months. Then I folded that copy and put it in the blue folder. The hardest part was not the work. The hardest part was eating Sunday dinners with Owen and not telling him everything. He would bring Lily over, and she would run into my arms yelling, "Grandpa Rusty!" She would put stickers on my shirt, feed cracker crumbs to my old hound, and fall asleep on my couch with one sock halfway off. Owen would ask, "You okay, Dad?" And I would say, "Just tired." That was not a lie. It was only too small to hold the truth. Maybe you are judging me now. Maybe you are saying, "Russell, you should have told your son the minute you found out." I have asked myself the same thing 1,000 times. But I knew my boy. If I had told Owen early, he would have driven straight to that lake house and demanded answers. Vivian would have smiled, called her lawyer, and moved the trust. She would have filed against him before sunset. She would have said he was unstable, angry, not legally Lily's father. And because his name was not where it should have been, the world might have believed her long enough to take the child from him. I could not risk Lily on the satisfaction of being honest too soon. So I waited until we had enough paper to outweigh Vivian's money. The day before everything broke, Denise called me at 4:31 inches the afternoon. "We got the emergency order," she said. I sat down hard in my chair. The judge had granted temporary protective guardianship review. Vivian could not remove Lily from the county. She could not move trust assets. She could not deny Owen access pending the hearing, based on his established parental role and the questions around the filings. We still had a fight ahead, but for the first time, Vivian no longer controlled the whole board. She did not know that yet. Proud people rarely hear the door closing until the latch catches. That night, Grace finally broke. At 1:08 inches the morning, she sent Owen a text. "I'm sorry. I can't do this anymore. Mom says you need to leave before Lily wakes up. Please don't make it ugly." Owen thought she meant an argument. He packed a bag and went to the kitchen to make coffee, trying to calm himself before talking to her. Then the alarm code stopped working. The garage door would not open. His debit card declined at the gas station. His phone buzzed with a message from Vivian. "You have mistaken access for rights. Leave the property peacefully." That was her mistake, not the cruelty. She had been cruel before. The mistake was putting it in writing. Grace came out the side door crying, carrying Lily wrapped in her yellow blanket. Owen told me later he would never forget the look on her face. Shame, terror, and something like relief all fighting at once. "She's your daughter," Grace whispered. "No matter what my mother says." Then she put Lily in his arms, pushed 2 bags out onto the porch, and closed the door behind him because she was too scared to walk through it herself. Owen drove until he realized his hands were shaking too badly to keep going. That was how he ended up at the gas station off Route 29. That was where I found him. I got them home. I carried Lily inside myself. She woke up just long enough to mumble, "Grandpa?" and then fell back asleep in Ruth's old bedroom, the one with the quilt my wife made the winter Owen got pneumonia. Owen stood in my kitchen like a man waiting for a sentence. I poured coffee he did not drink. Then I set the blue folder on the table. He looked at it, then at me. "What is that?" 11 months, I said. He stared. I started with the guardianship order, not the trust, not the forged paper, not Vivian. I started with the thing that mattered most. "You are not losing Lily today." His face changed, but he did not speak. I slid the court order across the table. His eyes moved over the page. Once. Twice. Then he sat down slowly. "What did you do?" "What I should have done with my own fear years ago," I said. I checked the records. Then I told him everything. I told him the adoption had never been finalized. I told him Vivian was on the guardianship documents and he was not. I told him about the trust, the missing letter, the notary journal, the house, the voicemails, the messages. He took it like a body takes cold water. At first, he went still. Then he started shaking. Not from weakness, from the effort it took not to break apart right there on my kitchen floor. "She knew?" he asked. I did not pretend not to understand. Grace knew some of it. Not all. Enough that she should have told you. He pressed both hands flat on the table. I could see the veins standing in his wrists. And Lily? She knows who comes when she cries, I said. She knows who cuts her pancakes. She knows who checks the closet for monsters. That is what she knows. The rest is adult paperwork, and we are going to fix it. His eyes filled then. He looked toward the hallway where Lily slept. I'm not on the papers, he whispered. Not yet. He looked back at me. I put the second folder down. Denise Carver is your lawyer now if you want her. First hearing is tomorrow at 10. Vivian cannot move Lily. She cannot touch the trust. She cannot lock you out of access and call it law. Owen covered his mouth with one hand. I had seen my son lift strangers off pavement with blood on his boots. I had seen him tell families things no family should have to hear, but I had never seen him look as young as he did in that chair. Why didn't you tell me? He asked. There it was, the question I deserved. I sat down across from him. Because I was afraid if I gave you the truth before I could give you protection, the truth would only hurt you. He stared at me for a long time. That wasn't your choice to make. No, I said. It wasn't. I did not defend myself. A father can do the necessary thing and still owe his child the dignity of his anger. The house was quiet. Outside, a garbage truck groaned down the street. Lily coughed once in the bedroom and settled again. Owen wiped his face with his sleeve. Then he said, Tell me what happens next. That was when I knew Vivian had already lost more than she understood. Not because of the papers, not because of the judge, because my son, at the lowest point of his life, did not ask how to hurt them. He asked how to protect his daughter. The hearing lasted 43 minutes. Vivian arrived in a cream suit with her attorney and the expression of a woman who had never had to wait her turn in a public hallway. Grace came separately. She looked like she had not slept. When she saw Owen, she started crying. He did not go to her. He held Lily's stuffed rabbit in both hands because Lily had cried when he tried to leave without it. Denise was calm. That is the thing about good lawyers. They do not need to sound like thunder when they have brought the storm in boxes. She presented the emergency order, the missing adoption decree, the questionable consent form, the dispatch records proving Owen could not have signed what Vivian's file claimed he signed, and Melanie's letter naming Owen as someone she trusted. Then Grace stood up. No one expected it. Not her attorney. Not Vivian. Maybe not even Grace. Her voice shook so hard the judge had to ask her to repeat herself twice. My mother told me Owen's name could be added later, she said. She told me if I argued, Lily might go into foster care. She told me Owen would leave me if he knew I had messed up the paperwork. I believed her because I was weak, but Owen is Lily's father. He has been from the first night. I want that corrected. Vivian turned toward her daughter with a look I will remember until I die. Not grief. Betrayal. Because people like Vivian can wound you for years and still feel stabbed when you finally bleed in a direction they did not approve. The judge did not finalize everything that day. Courts are not magic. They are mills. They grind slowly, even when the truth is obvious. But he extended the order. He appointed a guardian ad litem for Lily. He froze the trust. He ordered a full review of Vivian's management of the funds. He granted Owen temporary parental standing based on years of care, documentation, and the original intent letter. When we walked out, Owen leaned against the courthouse wall and breathed like a man who had been underwater for a long time. Grace approached him. I'm sorry, she said. He nodded once. I know. That was all. I respected him for that. Forgiveness is not a vending machine. You do not put in an apology and get closeness back. The next 6 months were not pretty, but they were clear. Vivian's control of the trust ended. The review found she had not stolen from Lily outright, but she had billed management fees through one of her companies that the court called excessive and improper. She had to repay them with interest. The adoption petition was corrected and refiled with Owen named properly. The forged consent form triggered a criminal investigation into Vivian's attorney and the notary process. Vivian was too careful to leave fingerprints on the worst parts, but careful is not the same as clean. Her attorney resigned from 2 boards. Her clinics lost a county contract after reporters got hold of the trust review. People who had once hurried across rooms to shake Vivian's hand began remembering other appointments when they saw her coming. The house on Laurel Bend went back to Whitcomb Properties. Owen did not fight for it. "I don't want Lily growing up in a place that was used as bait," he told me. That sounded like his mother. He found a small rental near the elementary school with a maple tree out front and a kitchen too narrow for two people to pass without turning sideways. He loved it. Lily loved it because the maple dropped leaves shaped like stars. As for Grace, she moved into an apartment above a florist shop and started counseling. I will not tie that story up with a ribbon it has not earned. She and Owen did not fall back into each other's arms. They did not pretend love fixes what fear helped break. But they learned to sit in the same room for Lily. They learned to speak plainly. Grace testified again at the final hearing, this time without trembling. The judge finalized Owen's adoption of Lily on a rainy Thursday in April. I was there. Lily wore a blue dress and sparkly shoes. She did not understand the law, of course. She only knew everyone kept smiling at her, and the judge gave her a stuffed bear wearing a tiny robe. When the judge said Owen was her legal father, Owen bowed his head. Lily climbed into his lap and asked if they could get pancakes. That was the whole world right there. Not the trust. Not Vivian. Not the house. A little girl asking her daddy for pancakes because she had no idea how close adults had come to making love prove itself on paper. Vivian did not attend. Grace did. Afterward, in the courthouse parking lot, she handed Owen an envelope. Inside was the original photo from the hospital the night Lily came to them. Owen asleep in a chair, baby Lily on his chest, one of her tiny hands resting under his chin. On the back, Grace had written one sentence. "I should have trusted what I saw before I feared what I was told." Owen kept the photo. He did not keep the marriage. Their divorce was final by the end of summer. They share time with Lily now, under an agreement no one in the Whitcomb family controls. Grace is better, though better does not erase what happened. Owen is healing, which is slower than better and more honest. Vivian sees Lily only with supervision. That was not my doing, that was the court's. I take no joy in it, but I sleep fine. Last week Lily turned 5 in my backyard. There were no white tents, no catered sandwiches, no board members pretending to like children. Just hot dogs, cupcakes, a sprinkler, and a dozen kids screaming like joy had taken human form. Owen built a little wooden stage because Lily wanted a concert party. She stood on it in rain boots and sang half of "You Are My Sunshine" before forgetting the words and laughing so hard she had to sit down. Grace laughed too. Owen looked over at me, and for a second I saw him as he had been at that gas station, gray-faced and hollow, holding his whole life in both arms. Then Lily ran to him, frosting on her nose, and he scooped her up like breathing. Later, after everyone left, he and I sat on the porch while Lily slept inside on the couch with my old hound on the rug below her. Owen said, "I was mad at you for a long time. I know. I still think you should have told me sooner. I know that too." He looked out at the yard, where paper plates were stacked on the picnic table and one pink balloon had gotten caught in the fence. "But I also know I would have gone over there swinging with nothing in my hands but anger." I did not answer. He turned to me then. "You gave me a way to keep my daughter. I look down because old men have pride too, and sometimes gratitude is harder to hold than blame. She was always yours," I said. He nodded. "Yeah, but now no one can tell her different." That is what this story taught me, friends. The people who mean to control your life do not always arrive with threats. Sometimes they arrive with keys to a better house. Sometimes they offer jobs, favors, introductions, legal help, family money. They call it support. They call it stability. They call it legacy. But real love does not need your name removed from the paperwork. Real love does not make you smaller so someone else can feel safe. And if there is a child in the middle, then every adult in the room has one job before pride, before revenge, before being right. Protect the child. Tell the truth in a way that leaves them with a floor under their feet. I do not know if I handled everything right. I am too old to pretend necessary choices are always clean ones. I kept secrets from my son because I believed silence would buy time, and time would buy protection. Maybe I was right. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I was both, which is where most parents live, if they are honest. But I know this. On the worst morning of my son's life, he was not alone. His daughter was not taken from him. And the woman who thought she could decide who counted as family learned something my wife could have told her for free. Family is not the person holding the keys. Family is the person who shows up before sunrise, opens the truck door, and says, "Come home." Sometimes protecting the people we love means staying calm long enough to do what is right, not what is loud. Russell could not erase Owen's pain, but he made sure his son and granddaughter still had a safe door to walk through. In hard seasons, love becomes patience, paperwork, truth, and a warm ride home.